Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wisdom Seeker Live podcast for a new week this week. And I hope that this will be a beginning for a great week for everyone. I want to, as always, start off with our explanation of how we see wisdom on Wisdom Seeker Live podcast. And wisdom we see as a journey and a process, if you will, has 3 steps to it. The first is to begin to get knowledge. Hopefully, most of us are getting knowledge on a regular basis, daily, formally, informally, and so on, and just good data and information. Second step in this journey or process is to gain understanding. And understanding is where we begin to take the knowledge that we've gotten and we begin to apply it. Use it to find answers and find solutions, get direction, and so on. And sometimes we might refer to that as experience. But the bigger and more important step in this process of gaining wisdom is when we go from knowledge and understanding to wisdom. And that change, that difference is in our perspective. The idea is that we want to get a much bigger perspective. Part of it is we're going to be looking inward and outward, but as we look outward, we want to begin to think in terms of how do things affect us? How does this knowledge and understanding affect us, but not just us? How does it affect the bigger world around us, the people around us, and how does it have impact on the lives of others as well? And so it's that much bigger perspective that allows us to have wisdom and to begin to make better choices, wiser choices, and to just have the benefits of wisdom. So it's that much greater perspective. And for those of us that are of a spiritual bent, we like to think of it in terms of seeing the world and those in it through God's eyes. So that's the way we see wisdom. And we hope that all of you will become wisdom seekers, because the benefits of gaining wisdom are very remarkable, and they benefit us greatly and help us make better choices and begin to learn to live in a wise fashion. Welcome, Jeremy. Always good to see from you, my friend. My friend. Glad to have you with us. Appreciate you joining, and anyone else that decides to join, would love for you to let us know where you joined from. And as always, a part of what we want you to do is to share your thoughts and comments, because that makes for a bigger, better show. And so we hope that you'll join in the conversation. I apologize. I'm kind of off my mark this morning. One of the things that I did was had to swap phones, and I don't know if any of you done that recently, but that is quite a process to deal with, and getting everything all back in order and set up is a bit of a challenge. So anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to continue our conversation in and around education, because education has become such a big part of our life and everything going on, to a point that having wisdom as we approach education and those choices is just so critical, because to not make those choices wisely can impact us in significant ways for a long time. And so we're going to talk about it further. And I appreciate that there is a lot of interest. And then I was reminded that at least in our area, schools are starting back now. Teachers are going back. One of the things that I want to clarify as I make comments excuse me, in regards to education is that the education system, when I refer to it, I am typically not referencing our frontline rank and file teachers. Our teachers that are out and part of the education system, especially K-12 teachers, are some of the hardest working, well-intended people that are out there. So again, I want to make it clear that as I refer to the education system, as it were, those are not the people that I'm thinking of, generally speaking. They are typically not a part of the problem. Many times they are the only reason that it's not worse than it is. The other thing I like to clarify is just words, because things become very vague, if you will, and interesting with words, because we have misunderstanding. We also have lots of connotation with different words. So when I refer to education, what I'm typically referring to there is the formal academic process that we have that is pretty worldwide. It varies a little bit, but the system and its design is fairly consistent. And so when I refer to education or education system, I'm talking about formal academic processes. I also want to let you know that, unfortunately, I feel the need to separate education and the education system from learning, because unfortunately, the way the system is designed, there is less and less learning that occurs in our current education system. And by the way, I believe that the challenges and issues with the education system are not just geographically restricted to the U.S. After talking with many people, looking at education not just on a U.S. level, but on a global big picture level, that the problems that we talk about are fairly universal. And by the way, I'm honored that to be a part of some education movements that are trying to change some of this. One of them is I'm very honored to be a part of the International Institute of Influencers. I am part of the leadership team with that organization, and we're coming up on a second year celebration. Lots of good things. Great event in Dubai. Unfortunately, I'm not able to be there this year as I was last year. But anyway, excuse me. Education's got challenges, and it's not just U.S. And I think that we need to be aware of some of those challenges and how we can be wise or wiser in our approach to education choices. And a couple of foundational concerns is that the education system as we have it, generally speaking, is a broken system. And we see the evidence of that. One, I think, of the most current evidences is the challenge that we see in the employment world. For a while now, several decades, the education system has been misaligned with the workforce and what is out there, what the needs are. And we could go into speculations as to why that is, but we'll just leave that alone for the moment. And we need to just consider what is out there. And some statistics that I like to share, because I think these are critical if you're a parent or grandparent or you're influencing a young person as they make choices about education and when the timing on that and the what of that and so on is very important. A lot of information that is out there that has been around for a while and assumed to be accurate may not be accurate, or it may be needing more perspective. A couple of troubling pieces of information is the percentage of people that start in a post-secondary education that do not complete it is remarkably high. In the U.S., it's about 70%. The actual stat is that by the end of the second year of a pursuit of a university degree, by most people, 70% of them have dropped out, and that is a real challenge. Also, there's in my opinion, a misnomer or a misperception that's out there, and that is somehow that education makes us better. And I know that comes from some statistics and data, but what has happened is that data has given causal effect to education and behavior. And the problem is that education is not a causal effect. It's a corollary effect. And the education does not make us better, doesn't give us character. I know that within the education system, there are character lessons and curriculum and all that. The problem is that learning character is not an academic process. Learning character is something that occurs through guidance, wise guidance for people, and experiences in their life to develop that character. A couple of other statistics that, again, trouble me about our current education system and the thought processes in and around it are that there is a statement out that if you get more education, you're going to make more money over the lifetime of your work. And it is technically true, but how that information is gathered and all is something that we need to understand. The typical place or typical background to that data is that they took a business major and that has a bachelor's degree, and they took, I believe it was an electrician, and they compared at median level the income amounts that are average and multiplied it out over work life, which is typically considered about 80,000 hours. And when they did that, the data based on that criteria shows that you will make, I think, a couple of million more if you have this person with the bachelor's in business administration made a couple of more million more than the electrician. The problem is they don't give you the rest of the context. And first of all, it's really interesting that a great majority, as high as 70% of people that have attained a bachelor's degree do not work in a field that is based on the education they received with their degree. Okay, and you say, so what? Well, first of all, I think most people try to make education choices based on things that they want to do and that they feel strong or passionate about. And therefore, if that high percentage are not working in the field they were targeting, you have to ask the question, are they going to be happy? And are they going to feel strongly about doing their work? And there is a body of thought out there that there's a lot of people that are not happy in their jobs with their degrees. Okay, so what that means is rather than performing at a median level with that degree, chances are you're going to perform at a lower level because you're not operating or working in an environment based on your educational attainment, and therefore you're probably not doing the things that you are desirous of, passionate about. So your performance is likely to be on the lower end rather than at median. And as a result, your performance is going to drive your income, and you're not likely to be as productive or make as much income that way. Whereas if you take an electrician, or, this can apply to different skills, trades, technical, and so on, and that person is in that job and they are pleased with what they're doing. They made a choice. They're happy with it. They like what they're doing. And therefore, they're performing at above median and even closer to the higher end. And when you look at the numbers with that context, the greater earnings concept actually shifts towards the electrician, meaning the electrician who's performing at that higher level, better enjoying their job and so on, are going to make more than that business administration major who's unhappy and not as productive. So again, understand the data and how it's arrived at, and make sure that you understand that information going in, because it is really concerning, especially now with the cost of education. Cost of education is astronomical, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Jeremy makes a comment, says most schools are more in favor of encouraging sports so that they're making the next Jordan, etc., versus focusing on creating or revamping the current education system to more of a modern day necessity of the skills of the current and future skill sets that should be encouraged to learn. You're right, Jeremy. The current education system is not really even focused on preparing young people or anyone for careers in a particular area. And again, in all of this, there are exceptions. There are bright spots out there in the education world where they are doing good things and making good things happen. The problem is that those situations are still very exceptional. Most of the mainstream production of education is not in line with what is needed in our workforce and our economy and so on. Much of the education priority is still based in a first revolution that occurred back in the 60s, industrial revolution. I apologize, my brain jumped tracks. The first industrial revolution, and that is still where a lot of the priority comes from with education and the way money's used and the priorities placed. Also, it is about the concept that education, the process of education, is more important than the outcome of the education. That drives a lot of what happens. And it's unfortunate because at the end of the day, originally education and the system there was designed not to create an educational elite, but rather to prepare and help people be functional in society and be productive. And most of that was focused on functional literacy. And we have gotten away from that, unfortunately, because it's just not the priority. It is the education experience that's the priority. And just to be honest with you, a byproduct of that is created an elite group that somehow feel as though that if you have degrees, that you are somehow better than people that don't have it. But what's really fascinating about that is, again, statistically speaking, the percentage of people that have bachelor's, bachelor's degree or higher is actually small. Depends on the data you look at, but it's somewhere between 25 and 30% of the population. And that's on the higher end in certain countries. Others, it's much lower. And therefore, somehow, this small group of people are better than most of us in the process. And by the way, just so you'll understand the perspective I bring, is I actually have 127 college hours, but because of some circumstances, I was 2 classes short of completing my bachelor's. But I do hold an honorary doctorate in education because of the work that I've been involved in education for now over 25 years. And so, again, education can have value, and in certain cases is necessary. But it isn't necessary that everyone get educated by one system, and that's the post-secondary university or college system. There are alternatives that are out there that are just as valuable and in some ways better. One of those alternatives is apprenticeship programs. Apprenticeship programs have been around a long time. And these programs allow young people to get additional learning, education related to their field, and it doesn't cost them thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars to do so. And it's a great alternative. And what's interesting, and this is something that I talk about with people in terms of education choices, is that the concept of apprenticeship, if you look at the history, is quite remarkable. And in fact, in our history, early in the U.S., and this is true because U.S. kind of leads an educational drive and innovation. But originally, if you wanted to be so-called, what we would call today white collar or professional workers, doctors, accountants, lawyers, what would have been an engineer at the time, and so on, it wasn't based in education, not the formal collegiate education. It was based in apprenticeships. And what's really even more fascinating is that today, the areas that are still important, that people are proven to be competent in what they're doing, the apprenticeship process is still involved. And one of the most notable indications of that is that, people that become doctors, you can get all the education that you want, all the academic pursuits you want, and you're not allowed to be a doctor until you have apprenticed. Now, we don't call it apprenticeship, we call it residency, but you have to do, I think, minimum of a year and upwards of 3 years in residency or apprenticeship to get to be considered a doctor. So again, this whole process or whole thought process that education is limited strictly to this academic process, and that's the only and best option for everyone is part of the problem of brokenness with the system. That somehow that to not attain a degree somehow makes us less of a person or even less intelligent, whatever. And it's just not true. Welcome, Richard. Thank you for being here. And yeah, when you're here, I can imagine your appreciation about apprenticeships. Other options that are out there is military pursuit. And is certainly a great option available for young people and very beneficial. And I can say that, because I have 2 sons that are military veterans, one Navy and one Marine Corps. And just again, so that people understand, I have also served in our state military as well. So when I talk about the military, I'm not speaking theoretical. I have lived it and had my own children live it. So again, another great option. Another unwise perspective that's out there that we need to address is that if you want to get a post-secondary education, such as a college degree, that you need to leave high school and go directly to do so. And there are so many exceptions to that rule that prove that is not the best option always, and many times not the best option, where people will get out of school and they'll go to work, they'll pursue different careers or military or whatever. And had they gone to college out of high school, they would have been one of those high dropout statistics that's out there. But whereas they later on decided to pursue a degree in a field that they had discovered to be the field that they're interested in, and it requires a degree, so they pursued it, and they go on to become very accomplished in their areas. And so, again, this idea that a young person needs to graduate from high school, go directly into a college or university is not necessarily, not likely, not probably the best option for most of our young people. So we really need to get and have some of this information in perspective. And I remind you that in the U.S., and I think it may be even a lower percentage in other parts of the world, but the most percentage of the job market that even require degrees to get these jobs is about 30%. And it is, again, depending on the data you look at, geography and so on, it's lower. So why are we sending and promoting and pushing basically 100% of young people to pursue opportunities that only allow them to be prepared best for about 30% or less of the jobs in the workforce? Again, the misalignment is great and truly unfortunate that it's that way. And so as a parent, a grandparent, someone influencing a young person, don't default to the idea that the best option for your young person is to go to get a university degree. It's not. And I can demonstrate to you why that is not the case. The other recent occurrence that is out there that is, again, you need to be aware of as a parent, grandparent, influencer of a young person in their decisions is that the degree, we used to say, oh, well, go get a degree, it can't hurt you. Well, current workforce environment, degrees can hurt you. Okay. And the way that turns out or way it appears is that there is a thought process that young people with degrees that cannot find jobs in the degree required sector of our employment or in our workforce, then turn to the areas that don't require a degree. The problem is that if that young person or anyone brings a degree to that field, quite often now it is a thought process that this young person is overeducated and underqualified. And therefore, it is not an uncommon situation where that if you have two otherwise equally qualified candidates looking for one of these skilled jobs or technical jobs or something like that, apply, and one of them has a bachelor's degree, especially one that is not of a specific nature related to whatever they're talking about doing, that person is less likely to get chosen. It's more likely they're going to choose someone that doesn't have that degree, because the implications that we have built into young people that get degrees. And the expectation that goes with that is that they're going to make more money as a result, including right up front. And second of all, that they are going to have longevity as a result of that degree. And what we're finding is that it's not true, but our young people are still told that it's true. So what happens is if they get hired in a non-degree job and then a degree required job opens up, that the tendency is going to be that they're going to move over to that job rather than staying in the field that they have chosen as a result. So again, this idea that go get a degree, it won't hurt you, is not true anymore. It can hurt a young person's options in the workforce that's out there currently. And part of the reason that being overeducated, underqualified piece has come out is because the current education system and the priorities set are for academic pursuit. And in order to qualify for the next level of academic pursuit, our young people don't have time to get additional experience or insight into other areas such as life skills or technical skills or whatever. And the way we see that unfold is that if you're pursuing a university degree, you spend most of your K-12 life pursuing academic accomplishment to qualify to get into a university or a college, and you have no time left or opportunity in many cases to enjoy things like business or technical skills such as trades, carpentry and masonry, plumbing, welding, those kinds of things, because you don't have time in your schedule, even if the school that you attend offers it. Plus, we have put a stigma out there in regards to the pursuit of other than a college degree. And unfortunately, the result is that we stigmatize those people that don't want to pursue college degrees, and something that is unfortunate because the young person can benefit from the other parts. And so, again, it is a problem that we've got. And as we consider the pursuit of education choices, then we need to have greater information. Richard, thanks. I saw that you responded with that some of the motivation is about dollars. Now, I'm assuming you're talking about the many billions of dollars that have become part of the big business of education and how that drives so many things. And in particular, I think you were responding to this whole thing that Jeremy commented about sports. And yes, it's driven by dollars. And what's really ironic about that is that the education system has fought involvement of business and industry over years because they have painted a picture that somehow it taints the process, that education is its own pure process. And but yet the education system has embraced sports and those things that drive dollars to the education system. So it's quite interesting. And then you asked the question, is this a topic for the Human SOS show? Sure. Something that we can cover in there. We typically deal more with stress-related conversations, but I will assure you that now education choices drive stress levels for a lot of people in a lot of ways. So certainly something we can consider. Welcome, Rick. Glad to have you with us. Appreciate you being here. So we just need to be better informed about what is out there and what is going on with the education system. And in fact, I've got some articles on my profile on LinkedIn, if you're interested, where we talk about some of the various components of education and the challenges. And one of those articles talks about the perfect storm in the workforce, and education and its priority is one of the storms that's going to contribute to some very big problems in the workforce. In fact, we're already seeing some of that with the Great Resignation and quiet quitting and some of the other impacts that are out there. And so it's really interesting. In fact, the other part, again, that we're seeing coming out of post-COVID and the pandemic is that, you know, we're still struggling to get products to market and delivered because we don't have people going into the workforce in the areas that support that, truck drivers and logistical support and so on, because of the focus for so long among education that everybody's got to be a so-called white collar worker. And it's created havoc, not just for our system, our logistics system, economic system, but for the young people, because they are missing out on opportunities that are much better suited for them. And by the time they figure it out, if they've completed a degree, quite often they're indebted. And if they don't complete a degree, they've already spent time and money unnecessarily, and they're behind the curve of getting into a better career suited better for them. So it's pretty disappointing. Rick makes a comment. He says, skilled trades is where it is at. More kids need to be pointed to that direction while in high school. College isn't for everyone. Why go into debt for a job that pays $12 an hour? Your point is well taken, Rick. It is quite interesting because, again, this notion that a college degree is going to guarantee you a higher wage coming out of college is just not true. If you look into the data, the percentage of college graduates that come out making big salaries, getting these remarkable jobs and so on is about on the same probability or percentage level of becoming a next rock star, sports star, actor, actress, whatever, you know, that big dream situation that a lot of our kids are pushed towards. And it's unfortunate, though, that that's what we are promoting to young people. Reality is, if you do check the data, a college graduate coming out, especially in a non-specific degree area, is probably going to make about $35,000 a year or so. And that's very different than what it is promoted, that you're going to graduate and you're going to get picked up by a company and be making six figures income and so on. And again, I'm not saying that college is all bad and that we shouldn't make that a part of the consideration. But what I do say is that it's unwise to make it the only best answer for every young person. And it's not. It is an unwise choice to default to that as what a young person needs to do in their post-secondary pursuits. And that it's also unwise to think that it is a good choice to prioritize that pursuit by all children in the K-12 or primary system. And so we really just need to rethink it. The other part that I like to share that troubles me is that our current education system has come to be a part of stigmatizing a lot of people, most people, in fact, because the tendency is that it creates a mindset among a majority of people that they are losers. And let me explain that. It's first of all, right now, the mindset among formal education is that the epitome of success in completing your primary education, K through 12, is that you get accepted into a college, and that really the ideal, you get accepted into a college that is somehow elite or whatever, and that you have high SAT scores and the like. The great majority of young people do not meet that qualification. They do not get that education attainment. So therefore, those people have missed the mark, or they have getting labeled as being somewhat of a loser. The other part of this process that's hideous is that there are young people that never want to pursue a formal education in the education system, and therefore they are stigmatized or viewed as less than, again, losers. And then when you continue the thought process that, if you attain a degree, then making big incomes and working in the field you're educated in, again, is going to be your mark of success. And since upwards of 70% of the people are not in fields that their education is for, and therefore they are not using that education as thought, well, again, the sense of being a loser. So that our system is creating a lot of people that are coming into life already feeling or labeled explicitly or implicitly as losers. And having worked in HR, having worked in recruiting, been an employer, I'm telling you, it is a real problem. And the irony of it is, of course, that we have for several generations told our young people that if they can put their mind to it, they can do anything. And that's a discussion for another day, but I will tell you, it's not true. It simply isn't. And then when a young person realizes they can't do just every and anything they want to, again, the sense of loss, being a loser. So let me get to some questions, comments from participants here. Richard has a comment, says, I hold a white collar job, and I can say without fear of equivocation that a lot of what makes me good at and like it has to do with what I learned in and remembered from a blue collar environment. So in other words, if I'm hearing what you say, Richard, is that white collar education or experience is not necessarily where you learned most of what you need to be good at and do the job that you're doing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the way I'm understanding it. Welcome, Lee. Glad to have you with us, and appreciate you being here. Hopefully make some comments about the topic. But the education system as we have it, again, is unfortunately misaligned. Another area that troubles me. Now, bear in mind that I'm a former teacher, that I've been trained, professionally trained as an educator, just like any other teacher out there. So I know the inside workings of being a teacher. And what's really fascinating to me is that a well-taught teacher is told that we should consider learning styles in our education, and that as a part of that consideration, that we should teach what is called blended strategy, so that as we teach, that we're geared to provide learning opportunities in different styles, because you don't have homogeneous groups of learning styles in a classroom. And in other words, the three primary learning styles that are out there is auditory, visual, and tactile or kinesthetic, and those are primary. But what's really interesting, if you will look into the way our education system is operated and designed, it's counter to that. A majority of education, for various reasons, not the least of which is that our education system is a production model, more like mass production than educating the individual. And what happens is that as a result, a lot of the learning style addressed in formal education is that of an auditory learner. And it is geared towards learning in an auditory fashion to prepare for a knowledge-based assessment. We call them tests. We call them required tests or assessments, or including SATs and things like that. That standardized testing is all based on an academic process, which most of it is driven to one learning style, which is, again, very unfortunate. I think as a result of our culture, the learning percentage of people that are auditory learners out there is actually reduced. I think the greatest number and growth in learning styles that you see is in area of visual learners for various reasons. But the point is that our education system is not doing what it is. It's not designed to accommodate even what it trains teachers to do. It is still, because it is focused on production, and it is the goal of pushing people out with degrees. The primary focus is using auditory, and the primary delivery of auditory is through lecture. And unfortunately, that again, we have a lot of teachers that would like to do a better approach in their teaching and do what they were trained to do blended strategy and vary up the different types of delivery and so on. But because they're pressured to teach towards standardized tests and production education, there's not an opportunity, because to do blended strategy is not as efficient from a time standpoint as auditory learning is, because auditory learning is based on what we, those of us in education, refer to as sit and get. And if you want to see evidence, and by the way, this is worse at the post-secondary level and the collegiate level than it is even in K-12. But if you go to most universities, what is the centerpiece of most of the classroom designs? And it's massive lecture halls where people sit and they're lectured to for a period of time and then told, get ready for a test. That is the core of how our system is designed. And it is problematic because it is geared towards learning styles that of one type, and it doesn't incorporate what is known to be a great practice to be effective in teaching, and that is to use blended strategy teaching. And but yet the system that we have on the whole is still geared towards auditory learners. And even though that is a small percentage of the people involved in education. And it's just, again, it's truly sad because when having been a teacher and having had students that were primarily not auditory learners, when you're given the opportunity to truly use blended strategy and begin to teach the different learning styles, it helps a lot of these young people be more effective in learning because it appeals to their dominant learning style. Now, I know I have been told that the idea of various learning, having a dominant learning style is in question. Having observed and experienced and looked at data, I think that it's very much true. Doesn't mean that any of us learn exclusively from one learning style, but we do have a style that is more dominant, and the more it can be included as part of that process, the more effective it is. In fact, the more we do that, the less we depend on rote memorization and more on real retention as part of learning. And again, I could go and get really nerdy on everyone and start digging into this and talking about the different aspects to it. Again, that would have to be another show. But as we're kind of winding up our time, just please, big picture message, don't assume, don't default to the idea that the best education process for your young person is to assume that they need to graduate from high school and go and enter into a college or university with the intent to attain a degree of some kind. Remember, 70%, a high percentage of the job market doesn't require those degrees. Also, a great number of the young people that do get these degrees are not being educated for the job they'll ultimately end up with. And so really consider that we need to think about our education choices for ourselves, for our young people, for anyone, and to revisit how we prioritize. And also remember, we don't need to assume that the best way to get a post-secondary education is to go directly out of the primary K-12 system into a college system to pursue a degree. There have been many people that have chosen not to go that route for a number of reasons, not the least of which that is that they know that they would not last at that point in time in that academic system because it doesn't appeal to them. And so they choose to go a different route and then later decide that they have found a career that does require a degree and pursue it then. Their ultimate outcome is much better than if they had graduated high school and gone into a college pursuit. Let's see. So Richard is offering a quote for today's topic. A profound dislike for merely absorbing knowledge and a strong compulsion to learn by doing is one of the most reliable signs of genius. I have to think on that, Richard. I like on the whole what I'm hearing. And that could be certainly, hopefully, that resonates with people. And thanks for sharing that. And Lee makes a comment, and this is just so true, that a lot of K-12 education is memorization. And Richard follows on with too much of it is. And it's true. What's really interesting, again, if you learn about learning and the education process, gaining knowledge, which is what is the baseline of what we're doing in formal education, is the lowest level of accomplishment in terms of being able to process and improve your intelligence. And as we mentioned with every show here, knowledge is just the first step towards wisdom. The problem is we prioritize knowledge above everything else to the detriment of pursuing wisdom. And we see the result out in our society, in our culture of that pursuit. Because unfortunately, we've got multiple generations now that have been pushed to gain knowledge and therefore have power, and they stop pursuing wisdom, and it stopped becoming or being a priority among the parents, grandparents, and so on. It was assumed that the education system was going to build all this into the young people, and it's not happening. And even, frankly, and this is part of why we talked about that a degree can hurt a young person, is that business and industry has realized that even those that get the degrees now are still not equipped the way that past generations were equipped when they came out with a degree. And it's all part of this big picture problem that we have built. And it's impacted our young people negatively, so that we are not equipping them to be ready for what the world is about, what they need, and what the world needs. And it's a real challenge. And so parents, grandparents, anyone influencing young people in their education choices, please consider how can it be approached more wisely, because it can be. There are ways to do it, but it's not the way the system's built. And I encourage you to really seek wisdom and help your young person seek wisdom about the choices that they make, and consider how they pursue education as part of that process. The choices they make, it's so important. Let's see. Jeremy has a comment. I personally believe that we should encourage skill schooling with actual hands-on labor prior to obtaining a white-collar job. And the reasoning behind such is so that the skill schooling can better prepare, while the hand-on may provide the achieving of skills needed for a white-collar job. I believe this wise approach is what is needed to assist with correcting the education situation that is being faced. It certainly would make a difference, Jeremy, that we don't disconnect working hard and working smart. Now, unfortunately, culturally, that has also occurred, that we have allowed this concept of everybody needs to work smarter rather than harder. Now, the key is that you need to work hard and smart. And if you pursue things like Jeremy talked about, is that then you have a better chance of doing both. So thanks for your time, and those that have watched and listened, hopefully you picked up something of value over the course of the podcast. I hope that you'll walk away and approach your career and education choices based on a wiser perspective. And if you're influencing young people, either children or grandchildren, as part of your life, please, again, look at this from a wise perspective, bigger picture, and encourage the young people to make wise choices, not choices based on cultural drive and so on. That's what we need, so that hopefully we can begin to get people in life working in a way that is congruent with them and their design and their purpose, so that they can function in a better way and in a more contented fashion. So thanks, everyone. I pray that you will, if you haven't already, become a wisdom seeker. By the way, I got to make a little plug for those of you that were on last week. I have been published in another book, and I've ordered copies of this book. It's a really great book. I co-author with 16 other men, and we tell the stories of our journey into authentic manhood and not giving in to cultural norms. And if you're interested in getting a copy of that book, you can get it directly from me if you like, and I will charge you less than what it costs retail, or you can get it on Amazon. But I encourage you to consider, because there's 17 of us that talk about our journey towards becoming men. And I have been found it very useful and helpful in reading the stories of the other men that all have part of authoring this book. It's called Voices of Strength, and the compiler of the book is named Brenda Dempsey. But love to share that with you. If you're interested, direct message me if you want a copy, and hopefully in less than 2 weeks I'll have them to be able to ship out. So thanks, everyone. God bless. Have an amazing week. Hope that each day you're seeking wisdom rather than just having knowledge and understanding. God bless. Take care. Bye now.